sample of what they've done. If it's a recording studio, say, can you play me another jazz record you've done? Entourage has done a million of them. Let me hear another jazz record you've done. You know, they keep them. Just listen to them. And that's it. If it doesn't sound good to you then, it's never going to sound good, believe me. No matter what they say, that, oh, that was a bad day. You know, no, it should sound fantastic. If it's a producer, you say, what other jazz vocals have you produced? Can I hear them? And I want to see your name, you know. I don't trust anybody. So you can Google everybody. Here's the other thing. I Google everybody. The minute I get their name, I just Google them and see what they've done. You know, Google is wonderful. Yes.
Along that same line, if you hear what they're playing for you, as in the history, and they play it, and you don't like the vocalist, but you like the work behind it, what are you listening for?
You're listening to how the vocalist sounds.
Oh.
Yeah. You're listening to how the vocalist
Not
sounds.
the musicians.
Well, you're listening to the whole thing. You want to be sure it sounds good because they're producing the whole record. But you want to be sure, you know, they're playing this for you, so it's their taste. They're not going to play you something they're not proud of, theoretically. You know, they're going to play you something they think is good. And I can't tell you how many times I've had people play me things and it doesn't sound really good.
Or it might not even be your style, you know, if someone's just really obsessed with a particular instrumental section that you don't like with your way you sing it.
You know, there's nothing like, ain't nothing like the real thing, you know, ain't nothing like getting a piece of what people think is good, and then you look at it and sometimes you go, you know, it's very interesting. And here's another thing. I always love to have people now send me an MP3 of something, not even meet with them until I hear an MP3, because I don't like, the worst thing for me is when I'm working with somebody, like I write with people all the time and they're not good writers, and once you're over at their house you've got to spend at least 45 minutes there. You can't be rude. And it's like a waste of time. I know they're not any good, and I know, you know, so if you get that MP3 and it's not good, then you can like,
Cool.
yeah, it's cool. This, you know, it's called being business. This is a business, and your job is to make yourself as good as you can be. You know, and you know, you don't want to not make it because the producer isn't good or because the piano player isn't good. You have to take responsibility. If you're not good, that's one thing. But if you're good, and we've all heard people who are really good and they surround themselves with people who aren't good. Okay, so the only thing that matters is the end result. Don't be embarrassed that sometimes it takes a very long time to get it. Luther Vandross used to use this engineer that I worked with, Paul Brown. And Luther Vandross was one of the greatest singers in the world, and I'd say, Paul, how long does it take him to do a vocal? He says, oh, about 2 weeks per song. 2 weeks per song? Wow. He said he literally takes a week to get all of his breaths where he wants them. I mean, you know, he had the money to do it, but, you know, so never feel bad. Yes, most engineers tweak the pitch of the vocals with auto-tune. You know, it's done. But you don't want it done so much. I can literally hear sometimes. There's some people who just do it so much. Okay? Mixing. Does anyone know what's done in mixing? John, do you know what's done in mixing?
That's where you put all the tracks together at the right level so it sounds like a song.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, I have heard so many CDs where I want to hear the vocalist and I can't believe how the band is overpowering.
You got it. That's because the producer generally is the instrumentalist. I had a drummer produce one of my CDs. To this day, the drums are so. What was that? It was a crazy guy named Joe Pasquale.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
And the drums are so loud, and every time somebody hears the record, they go, wow, those drums are loud. And I would tell him, I'd say, you know, the drums are too loud. And he'd go, oh, no, they're fine.
No.
So you're totally right. You're totally right. Okay, a mixing is taking all the tracks recorded in the studio and putting them in their proper context, adding echo, reverb, compression, and other effects to make them sound better.
Did I mention one thing?
Yeah.
About the same thing we'll talk about. Same thing for the arranger. He wants to hear everything you wrote, you know, as opposed to everything the singer is singing. So that's another thing. As a producer, I have the word two hats, and I'm not a producer, but on this particular album. But you need to be careful of that, as Mark has said. But there's two ways of looking at it, in my perspective, and I'd like to see what you think. There's the singer out in front of the background, and then there's the singer within the background. I like the second way, naturally. And I like, especially with a fairly big ensemble or horns or whatever, you know, not just the rhythm section. I like to hear the thing from where the conductor would be. If the conductor were conducting and the singer were in front of me, I like to hear people over here and like that. I was told recently that's wrong. You should be hearing it from where the audience hears it, which means everything is within 45 degrees. I just happen to like it the other way. How do you feel about it?
Okay. Both are correct. And it all depends on genre. And people get it, we've all had our mothers say, I can't hear the lyrics of that song. Well, rock and roll, you're not supposed to hear the lyrics sometimes because it's about the record. That's why the Grammys have Record of the Year and Song of the Year. But if we're talking about jazz records and a jazz vocal record, I think that the vocal should be in front. Except if it's a swinging number, you want to be in the track.
Yeah.
You don't want to be so far out that the groove isn't happening. And I don't like if it's too far out, then it gets into cabaret. The great thing about a jazz vocal is the jazz vocal reacts to the track. That's what a jazz singer is. You're reacting with the time of the track. So if you're so far out, you're like in your own world. Then you're Barbra Streisand, or you're Victor Moan or something. It's MOR. But so so jazz would be less than cabaret or MOR. But a ballad, I would put it out a little bit, and a swinging number, I'd tuck it in a little bit.
So you're getting into a situation here where you've got all these tracks, and you're trying to mix them, and sometimes engineers won't listen.
Well, you don't want to work with an engineer. You should know that.
Yeah.
If the engineer isn't listening,
okay.
you don't want
So
to.
let's say just and all that stuff. The ideal, you kind of painted the ideal situation. But how do you maintain enough control over the recordings that if you do run into a situation where one person just suddenly goes loony in the middle of this thing, so you can get it redone, so it doesn't come on.
That's happened many times with me.
Yeah.
And as long as you make sure that your tracks are recorded cleanly, which most good studios will do, they will record them clean. Make sure that at the very minimum that the tracks are being put down, that there's not trouble with the tracks, leakage or something. And you'll know that. And it's pretty easy to tell. As long as your tracks are recorded cleanly, you're fine.
And then you can get possession of the thing and redo it if
you own it. I mean, whoever, it's yours. Yeah, you can. And I did that with Dolores' record. She just wasn't happy at Entourage. She wasn't. They were more of a rock and roll guys, and she wanted somebody who was just more on her wavelength. And Nolan is a trumpet player, and he's a jazz guy, and she felt more comfortable there. And we took the tracks and we just brought it over. But we recorded all the tracks in Entourage.
Yeah. Okay.
She did the vocals.
Is there a difference between mixing and mastering?
Yes, there is, and we'll get to mastering in a minute. Mixing, the record can be broken in the mix. It can really be messed up. It gets me very nervous. I don't like to mix my own records. I defer to the engineer, and I like. And how I do it is things they like and don't. It's very subjective. And how you need to do is you need to ask the engineer, play me some things you like. You need to do all this as pre-production that's not costing you any money. What I'm trying to tell you is get all this settled before you ever get into the studio. Know that engineer has the same ear as you have. Likes the same things you like. So you're not going to fight with him. So you're not saying, hey, I want my vocal out front. He'll go, no, I like it more in the mix. And it's legitimate. I mean, I'm not saying, but it's just not what I like.
Well, there's always a chance too. You're making a bad call and you don't know it, and sometimes you want to have, and sometimes you know what you want, and you're the expert. Actually.
And you want, before I went in, I produced my last record, which I tell everybody not to do, but I produced it with Dolores. And I sat the engineer down, Nolan, and I said, okay, this is what I want to tell you. Because I knew he was a people-pleasing kind of guy. I said, I know that you want to always please me, but don't. I said, this is what's wrong with me as a singer, and make sure I never do this on the record. I said, if I find out you let it slip, I won't work with you again. And I didn't do it with a smile on my face. I did it like, this is what I mean. And he did. I said, if I'm not in the groove, if I'm not swinging, and if you don't tell me, and suddenly I get a review where they go, that guy's not swinging, the better. Pop music has a totally different philosophy. It's compressed, it's top-endy, they can go wild with the effects, but jazz really, that's not the way it's mixed. So in a way it's easier, okay? Bring your own blank CDs to the studios. The studio charges you 3 times as much, and it adds up. That's a nice little money-saving tip. Here's the other thing. everything sounds good when you mix it on those great speakers in the studio. You know? And then you take it home and it sounds like shit, right? So this is what I say. The system I know best is my car stereo. I'm not saying it's the best system, I'm saying it's the one I know the best.
Yeah.
So I say to the engineer, please make me a CD, here's my CD, blank CD, and give it to me, and I go out in the car, I take 5 minutes, and I listen to it in the car.
Well, wasn't that the Motown? They used to have that little radio that they'd stick up there, and they would mix it on that radio.
Yeah, because that's what you...
Because that's where it was going to be played.
That was where it was going to be played.
So that's what I do. I take it in my car, because I know that. I know how everything sounds there. And if it doesn't sound good, if suddenly my voice disappears, it sounded great in the studio, but all of a sudden I can't hear my voice, there's no presence, I go, oh, it needs more vocal. So I mix, and that's a really good little tip. It takes you 5 minutes to go into your car, but lots of people do it, so I don't think
I've been listening to the reference CD in the car with this thing I've just been working on, and I realized that I can't be driving, especially on a freeway, because I won't hear any bass. I'll think the bass is missing.
Oh, okay.
So I have to be sitting still with no road noise. But that's great.
That's good. Know what your money tracks are. Okay, sequencing help. Sequencing is a very important thing. When you do a jazz CD, or any CD, your first couple of tracks are the tracks that generally radio's going to pay attention to. Okay? So you want the tracks that are going to be I call it the money tracks, the ones that people are going to say, that's great. You want those to be the lead off. You don't want to be one of these artists who say, well, I want to lead it up to my great track. Because they're never going to get to track 12 if they don't like track 1. So the money tracks are the ones that people are going to love the most. They should go first. You do not have time to start with a whimper and end with a bang. Baby bang. That's what I say. This is what I pick 7 or 11 friends, a focus group, and I make them my test group. I cut them a CD of the tracks in any order, and that I thought was good. Then I ask them to email me or call me with their 2 favorite tracks. I've been doing this now for my last 4 records. Be careful who you pick as your focus group. Make sure they don't have any hidden agendas. And don't have your mother do it, or your father do it. Pick because I had one where I had this friend of mine, and she called me and she just reamed me on the record. She just went on and on about 2 pages of email, like how terrible the record was, in the most sabotaging. It was awful, and it completely shook me up. And luckily my partner said, she's nuts, it's great. And I've gotten 24 great reviews and 1 like sort of mediocre, so I thought, she's nuts.
Her friend.
My friend, she's not my friend anymore.
Her friend was
Yeah, I didn't use her friend as the producer. That was it, the producer ranger. So it was really something. So I'm saying be careful, But I have some friends, and then I tell them, what are you? I don't say tell me about the record. I just say, what are your 2 favorite tracks? And is there something you don't like? I don't give them license to tell me a lot. But things will come up, they'll go, oh, I love that song. Everybody always comes up, And I'll tell you, it's been the tracks people pick are the tracks of the radio tracks. That really helps out. He'll go, these are the tracks. And he's a professional, he knows the market, and it's going to really help you sequencing the record. Mastering. Okay. I'm going to say some things today that I've never said before. My first 9 records, I went to the best mastering places, and I spent $2,000 and I got them mastered. And I still think if you have the money to do that, that's great. But on this last record, I had Nolan do his mastering program on it, and nobody noticed. It didn't affect anything. This was probably my best reviewed, played record, and I didn't spend $2,000 on the mastering. I spent about $200. So, at the same time, he was really good at it. So some people aren't really good at it, and you can really mess it up in the mastering. Okay, does anybody know what the mastering does?
Well, it fills out the sound and corrects that. It fixes any last-minute balancing things that have to be done. It gets the thing in tune. That's what I understand. You can kind of, if there's something that's slightly out of tune,
you should have worked. You can work on that before the master.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. I mean, any last-minute things, possibly can fix. But basically, you want to have most everything sound great before you get to the mastering, because you can't fix it in the mastering, just like you can't fix it in the mix. It can get your levels right. You know everything's recorded at a different level. You want to have the levels, not something jump out, something too quiet. You get your levels right, and it does fill out the sound. People have fantastic equipment. Capitol Records is a great guy that I've used. Everin Grockner and Mark McMaster. It makes it sound better. It puts a sheen on it.
Yeah.
So, and it can make it sound bad. They can run it through the equipment and it sounds bad. It should only be done by professionals. Any questions up to this point?
So, I mean, can you take the live stuff and get it mastered to improve the sound quality?
Okay, so how did you get the live stuff? Is it recorded on separate tracks?
No.
It's all.
There was just one